And I'm also going to let everybody in now.
Yeah.
Michael, over to you.
Thank you, Nicola. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this event run by the Kensington-Chelsea Chamber of Commerce. I am chairman of the Chamber. It's great to see everybody here today. Today we're going to be joined by Greg Hands. We are very fortunate that 9 months ago we were planning our Christmas lunch at the Holiday Inn Kensington Forum, and we had the foresight to book Greg in for today's event. We thought it'd be a lovely lunch, but we're glad that we converted it into today's Q&A session, and we look forward to speaking to Greg. So Greg is the MP for Hammersmith and Fulham and Chelsea and Fulham, and has been since 2005, and is currently Minister of State for Trade Policy. So hello Greg. Can you tell us a bit
Hi,
about—
Michael.
Tell us a bit about trade policy.
Well, thank you. I'm told that my machine is telling me my internet connection is unstable. At least it's not saying that I am unstable. But I hope everybody, if I am starting to break up, then I do have the option of switching the video off. But I think it's nice to have the video on, to be honest. But do signal. Maybe Nicola could signal if it's not getting too good. Well, thank you very much indeed, Michael, for that short introduction, and thank you everybody for joining. I won't speak for long to leave as much time as possible for Q&A. Just a few things to say. First of all, it's inconceivable. When we think back a year ago, it was 2 days before the general election. Everything was obviously incredibly uncertain on pretty much all fronts. Now we've got a high degree of uncertainty, but on different fronts than we had a year ago. So a huge amount has happened in the last year that you're all only too aware of. First of all, just to say a huge thank you for everything that you're doing. Business is so important for the government and also for us locally. As I constantly remind everybody, starting from my own children through to people coming to my constituency surgery, that if we don't have businesses, we don't have people with jobs, and if we don't have people with jobs, we don't have taxes, and if we don't have taxes, we don't have the NHS, and we don't have all of the public services that have done such a brilliant job during the whole pandemic. I'm acutely aware that it's been a very difficult year for small businesses and also many large businesses, and acutely aware of that. The government has put in an enormous amount of cash helping businesses, overall around just over £200 billion this year, which, to put it in perspective, is about 4 times the annual defence budget, the amount of money that government has put in on different employment packages and different business packages and so on. So, of course, there'll be criticism of whether the government has done the right thing at different times and whether the support is they're going to the right places, the right people. But I don't think anybody could doubt the level of support that Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak have given to businesses and to the economy throughout the course of the year. Obviously, there are consequences. Our unemployment rate in Kensington and Chelsea has risen, albeit from a very low level. So there are real life, real world consequences for people as well as for businesses as well. So we are acutely aware of that, but I think the government overall has done a good job in supporting businesses. But I'm very happy to take any questions where you think that could be refined or improved further. Just a couple of words on the exit from the EU and the end of the transition period. And I can't really say too much about it. It's obviously a very a live negotiation happening as we speak. And obviously I'm not in the negotiating room. As you can see, I'm in my office here in Fulham. So I can't give you a sort of live commentary from what is happening in Brussels, other than to say it's at a very critical point in those negotiations that have consumed us for the last 4.5 years. Now is not the time for the faint-hearted. My personal belief has always been that there is a deal to be done there between the UK and the European Union, and I'm fingers crossed and very much hoping that there will be. One thing to note, though, and this may well crop up in the Q&A, is that our business relationship with the European Union will change on the 1st of January. It's really important to recognize that it's reckoned around about 80% of those changes, or the quantum of changes, will happen whether we have a deal or not. And the UK will leave the EU Customs Union on the 1st of January. The UK will leave the EU single market on the 1st of January. We are hoping for a tariff-free, quota-free deal, but that doesn't mean to say that things won't change. So you can have a look at how to be ready for that change. I appreciate it's 3 weeks today. We'll be doing a lot of message broadcasting out there about the changes that are coming, but do please visit gov.uk. You'll find information there, anything from tariffs through to business visas, through to movement of people, movement of goods, services alignment, data adequacy. Many of these things are still subject to those different negotiations, but please do go to gov.uk or contact me or Felicity Buchan, the MP for Kensington, if you've got any questions about that. But I think, Michael, you wanted me to just talk about trade, which is my portfolio, trade with the rest of the world. Important to note that trade with the EU is not in my portfolio. That's with Task Force Europe and David Frost, working under Michael Gove at the Cabinet Office. But my portfolio is trade with the rest of the world. And here we have had, in my view, a very successful year. Now, you said, well, of course you would say that, Minister Hans, it's your portfolio. But I'll be quite frank with you, I think a lot of us, a lot of commentators didn't think it was going to be possible to do what we've done. We've rolled over almost all of the EU trade agreements. We've now rolled over trade arrangements with 55 different countries, including major economies like South Korea, like Canada, South Africa. Just yesterday, we signed the Singapore agreement. Liz Truss is on her way to Vietnam at the moment, so I can give you a slight hint as to what might be coming with Vietnam. And that covers about 93% of the trade covered by those existing trade agreements. That has been a big success. And the second area is that we've actually shown we can go further than the European Union. You know, I spent 2 years at the EU's Trade Foreign Affairs Council as Britain's representative when it came to doing a lot of these EU deals. And I could say that the UK voice was the most pro-free trade in that room of the 28 member states of the European Union. So not surprisingly, that we would take advantage, being outside of the EU, of being able to go further on trade agreements than the EU was ever able to do. So most notably in the new Japan deal that we signed in October, goes further than the existing EU-Japan deal in areas like data and digital. We've removed unnecessary data localization rules. Anybody who's on this call, for example, involved in fintech and wants to set up in Japan, you'll know how difficult data localization rules can be for tech companies. Basically a rule that you've got to store, any data you gather, you've got to store in that country, which sounds like the sort of thing that politicians would want, you know. I mean, I don't want my people's data sort of flying around the world, but actually, if you're a business setting up a new operation in a market like Japan, you know, you don't really want to have the encumbrance of taking on a local data partner and having to store all of that new data that you've got in that country. Of course, there are data protection controls in place to protect individual data, but I think that is a really, really good thing for us to be doing. We've gone further on things like UK geographic indicators. We've got better rules of origin. Anybody who really takes a strong interest in trade will know those are really important innovations that shows that the UK can go further than the European Union. And finally, we're involved in negotiations with other trading counterparts. With the US, we've done 5 rounds of negotiations with the United States. We're obviously waiting to see what the new administration might want to do, but that's in a good place. We've also been negotiating with Australia, with New Zealand, and in the new year, we will be applying to join the Comprehensive and Progressive Trans-Pacific Partnership, which is one of the world's hardest things to say, and it's got an even more complex acronym, the CPTPP. The UK will be joining. Generally in trade, the more complex the acronym, the more important the body. The CPTPP is a trading group of 11 countries, including developed economies like Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and Japan, as well as developing world economies like Vietnam, Peru, Chile, and others. And the ability to join something like that was never possible in the EU, but will allow the UK to have favorable trading terms with many countries, in this case on the Pacific Rim, but we're also looking at future trading options elsewhere as well. We've also set up our own tariff regime, which comes in on the 1st of January, the UK global tariff. We've taken the EU's common external tariff and we've lowered it, simplified it, and made it greener. So currently around about 80% of goods come into the UK from the rest of the world tariff-free. That will rise to around 87 or 88%. We've also simplified that tariff regime and also removed tariffs from a whole series of environmental goods like steam turbines, which never should have had tariffs on in the first place. So we've taken that and we've gone further as well. So we'll stop there, Michael, just say it's a really exciting year. It has been this year for UK trade, and next year will be even more exciting. But we've got big, there's challenges and opportunities. The biggest challenge is going to be the impact on the 1st of January of those changes in our trading relationship with the EU. I will stress again that trading relationship is going to change significantly whether we do this free trade agreement or not. So please, if you've not already put time and effort into making sure your business is ready for that arrangement, please do go to gov.uk or feel free to ask me questions now about that. But thank you, Michael. And sorry, I'm not sounding very full of Christmas cheer. And happy Christmas to everybody. And I'm delighted to be with you today. Thank you.
Well done. So thank you, Greg. So for our audience, we've had many people asking the same questions. So I have kind of collated them and I will ask some questions along with members of the executive and some sponsors. I'll ask some questions of Greg. We're kind of covering the kind of themes of the questions that have been sent in. And Greg, I think I heard today that we signed a trade agreement with Singapore.
That's correct, yes. Yesterday, Singapore time, overnight UK time, yeah.
Okay. So,
or other way around, hold on. Is that right? No, hold on. Yes. What is today? So I'm slightly confused with the time zone, but basically in the last 24 hours, yeah.
Great stuff.
I think it's technically yesterday. I think it was the 9th in Singapore was the signing date.
So the transition period is going to end on the 1st of January. Do you think the country is prepared for it?
Well, that's a very good question, Michael. I think government is prepared for it. I think the country and businesses, I think, are quite well prepared for it. The larger businesses, I would say in particular, SMEs less well prepared. And I don't mean this in a critical way. This is not somebody from government coming along to criticize businesses. I think it's often been difficult, and I totally understand from a business perspective. The last 4.5 years, there's been lots of stops and starts, different negotiations, different deals have been, torpedoed by Parliament. Back we go off to Brussels. It's been quite an ordeal if you're managing a business that is dependent on trade with the EU, I would say. I'm not going to go back to the referendum in 2016, but I think it has been a difficult time for businesses, and I very much understand that. What I would stress really heavily is that regardless of what happens in the deal, in the talks to get a free trade agreement, which I strongly hope that we get, arrangements will change significantly on the 1st of January. Most of the government polling on this shows that large businesses, multinationals are ready for that, and they've got the systems in place and the knowledge and the connections across different countries to be able to manage that. I wouldn't say always smoothly, but quite well. But I think SMEs, business preparedness is not as good as I would like it to be. And that's one of the reasons why my message to you clearly today is to go to gov.uk, check out the tariff tools, check out the trading with the UK, the TWUC as it's called, check out the CHEG, which is exporting goods to the UK. There's lots of different areas on the gov.uk website that will be very helpful. I think the country I think the country is, frankly, after 4.5 years, I think it is ready for the end of the transition period in that sense. I don't think there's really much appetite apart from some hardcore people at one extreme or other of the debate who want the debate to keep going on, beyond 4.5 years. So I think there's kind of a popular readiness to move on. I'm just not always sure. I mean, this is not a false alarm, the 1st of January. It's set in law. The UK has set in law that this will be the end of the transition period. It will not be possible to extend that transition period. So this is not a false alarm. This is happening on the 1st of January, and everybody needs to make sure that we're all ready for it.
Yes. So I think many small businesses will feel that with 3 weeks to go until the end of the transition period, that it's difficult to plan if we don't know if we're planning for a deal or a no deal. You're kind of having to plan for two diverse possibilities.
Well, that's a good point, Michael. But again, I would stress that whether there's a deal or not won't have an impact on, as I say, around 80% of the preparedness one needs to make. So I would say, don't wait to see white smoke in Brussels. Do the preparations now. See what the EU as a whole, EU member states are saying. And I know that often it's not easy to get hold of this information from EU member states, for example. What the visa regulations will be kicking in will vary. That is a competence at a member state level. So each of the EU 27 will have, or could have, and likely will have, different regulations for Brits from the 1st of January. So I would urge anybody who's actually doing business and needs to travel to do business to please check out that information. Come back to me. I'm hoping my parliamentary office doesn't get too inundated with inquiries, but do come back to me if you have finding difficulty navigating that information. So as I say, a lot of this is going to change whether a deal is done or not. A deal would smooth things considerably because then there'll be no tariffs to be paid, but still we'll be outside of the customs union and customs forms and customs formalities will kick in, even if there is no tariff to be paid. So one needs to understand how to do customs in trade with the European Union that we've all been used to with trade with the US, Canada, Japan for decades. Obviously, some SMEs may only trade with or do business with the EU, not with the rest of the world. So they may be completely unaware of customs formularities. That's where. So I think in answer to your question, Michael, the easy thing would be, I think, to become gripped by the sort of political drama in Brussels. My advice would be the sensible thing to do is to make sure your preparations are in place and do it as soon as possible. Okay.
So the governor of the Bank of England said that the cost of a kind of hard no deal Brexit would cost more than the coronavirus pandemic. So given that, would it not be better just to extend the transition period?
Well, I don't agree with that, Michael. The government doesn't take that view. The government takes the view that the transition period has been long enough. There's been 4.5 years debating all of this. And in any case, it's been legislated into UK law that the transition period will end on the 31st of December. So I'm afraid that question is OTOs. Those changes will come in on the 1st of January. We will be outside of the customs union and the single market.
Okay. And so if there is a hard Brexit with no deal, when do you think a trade deal with Europe would actually, you'll be able to sign one?
Well, look, I mean, we're very much hoping that that isn't the case. We're very much hoping that there is going to be a free trade agreement between the UK and the European Union. But in terms of speculation, what would happen if there isn't one, I'm afraid I'm not really able to go down that road.
Okay. And so one of our other kind of major trading partners is America. The President-elect Biden, I think, has announced he wants to sort out his own country before he's going to sort out any trade deals. So how do you think we're going to do a trade deal with America?
Yeah, well, thank you, Mike. Well, the trade deal with the US that I've been intimately involved with is in a very good state. We've done 5 rounds of negotiations. A lot of the text has actually been agreed. By the way, there's a great chapter on SMEs. So any SME that's on this call and doing business with the United States or wanting to do more business with the United States, that'll be very, very good news going forward. Nothing is agreed until everything is agreed. However, there's still some areas of the negotiation that haven't been finished yet. Look, I'm not here to represent the incoming Biden administration. We have very good relations. We've been keen in the US negotiation to build support on both sides of the aisle, for want of a better term. So I regularly brief Republican and Democratic governors, senators, members of Congress, chairs of key congressional committees and so on, and keeping up that bipartisan support. In fact, I was talking to Nancy Pelosi only about 3 or 4 weeks ago on this. And I think there's strong bipartisan support for doing a trade deal with the United Kingdom. I totally understand that an incoming new US administration will have a whole host of priorities. But I think doing a trade deal with the UK could be an early win for a Biden presidency. But look, it's up to them. They don't even come in until the 20th of January. But I think we've got the deal into a very, very good place. And it certainly was never dependent on any particular party or any particular individual winning the election on the 3rd of November.
Okay. Thank you, Greg. So next I'm going to have Martin Herbert, who's on the executive committee of the Chamber and is Managing Director of Bannon's. Would like to ask a question on Brexit.
Thank you, Michael. Hello, Greg. Thank you. Are you concerned for the Conservative government in the event that a Brexit deal is not reached? There's bound to be a lot of vilification as a consequence. And we're already seeing it this morning with the prospect of failure, especially aimed towards the Prime Minister, I think it's fair to say. And what measures are in place to mitigate this potential situation? Yeah,
well, thank you, Martin. Look, I can't guess or speculate on sort of party political fortunes. First thing I say, of course, we already have a deal with the European Union. We have the withdrawal agreement. So this is a question about getting a further deal, a free trade agreement. So it isn't the case that was being discussed a year or so ago that we might be leaving the European Union without a deal at all. You know, there is a deal in place called the withdrawal agreement. Obviously, we want there to be a free trade agreement with zero tariffs and zero quotas. It may be that we don't achieve zero tariffs, zero quotas, by the way. You know, it may be that we have a free trade agreement which doesn't have zero tariffs or zero quotas. I'd be very surprised if we had a free trade agreement that had kind of extensive tariff lines in it. But in terms of where we are overall, look, I mean, I don't want to get into the space of party politics, but I think the country overall is very supportive of the position the government has taken in these talks, and very supportive of the government's stance on this, which, you know, I'm not ignoring for a moment that Kensington Chelsea voted 69% Remain, as I did. In June 2016. But I think the debate has moved on in the last 4.5 years. I think most of the country is united behind the government's position that the most recent EU demands, I think, are unreasonable. You know, the EU is stating that we will have less control over our fisheries than any other country in the world. The EU is stating that if they change their rules and we don't follow, then they have the automatic right to inflict a retaliatory punishment on the UK. I don't see, I think in Boris Johnson's word, and I appreciate Boris may not be everybody's most popular politician, but when he said that no UK Prime Minister could reasonably sign up to those rules, I think most people would agree with him. You know, in terms of that the UK must align ourselves to these new EU rules with having no say over those EU rules. And there'll be a punishment inflicted on the UK if we don't. And secondly, that we have less control over our waters than any other country in the world. I think most people in the UK are behind what the government is trying to do, which is to get a free trade agreement but not at any price. I mean, ultimately, what the UK is asking for, which you could criticise as being as not asking for at close enough a relationship, but the UK is asking for the same relationship that the EU, the same free trade agreement that the EU has already agreed with Canada or with Japan, which ironically, I've spent a large part of this year rolling over those agreements. I mean, I know them quite well. And all that the UK is asking for is Brussels to give us the same trade agreement that it has given Canada or Japan. And that, I think, is not an unreasonable demand. We're not asking for some kind of exceptional position. We're asking for the sort of thing that any sovereign country would seek in a trade agreement with a third party, in this case, the EU. We're no longer members of the EU. That isn't my choice, that is the choice of the British people. But I think it's reasonable, the position the UK government is taking in those negotiations.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you very much.
So the next question is from Andrew Boyd of BGM Accountants, another sponsor of the Chamber, who's got a question about, I think it's New Year resolutions.
Hi. In our profession as chartered accountants, when we come to the end of an assignment, we'll reflect on what the successes have been and where things need to be improved in the future. And I think at this time of year, lots of people do that personally as well. As we approach the end of the EU transition period, what do you as a former Remainer consider the successes so far, and what can London and the UK look forward to in the years ahead?
That's a great question, Andrew. And it's been an exceptionally difficult year for everybody. It's been a very difficult year in politics. It's certainly been a very difficult year in business as well. I think looking back over the year, different decisions might have been made on the pandemic. I'm not going to second guess that. That'll be for future historians, I think, to judge. The one thing I would say, I don't think the UK has been fundamentally different in terms of its approach on the pandemic to other major Western countries. Actually, I know there's been a lot of debate about Germany's success, whether Sweden had the right route. But actually, when you look at what's happened, our approach has not been fundamentally different to most of our kind of peer group, for want of a better term. What could we have done differently? I'm sure there'll be different things that we could have done in relation to COVID. You know, what we now know about the disease today is fundamentally very different to what we knew back in February or early March, when some of those important decisions, like the first national lockdown that kicked in on the 23rd of March, you know, we know an awful lot more about the virus today than we did then. So the temptation would always be to, you know, use the information we know today and sort of and try and critique the decisions that were made then. I mean, that's inevitably, that happens in politics all the time. One thing I would say is that a global pandemic, most people making decisions have had experience, or at least in all of our lifetimes, would have had experience of things like a global recession, localized recessions, trade disruptions, even conflicts around the world. But there hasn't really been, in that sense, a global pandemic really for a long, long time. And I think that the preparation for that pandemic, I think, will also be critiqued, done by different countries. I would stress, I don't think the UK's policy approach has been fundamentally that different. As I've already said, we've actually put a huge amount of money into the economy. I think in terms of a New Year's resolution going forward, I think next year offers a great opportunity for UK trade. We're already committed to negotiate deals that go further than the existing deals we rolled over with Canada, with South Korea. We will be applying to join the CPTPP, this new trading group of 11 countries, and trying to get our deals with the US, Australia, and New Zealand over the line, looking at potential future trading opportunities like India, like the Gulf, like Brazil. You know, there's a huge amount for us. I mean, there's almost unlimited work that we could be doing in the Department for International Trade to improve Britain's trading relations. And let's take advantage of that. You know, so my New Year's resolution would be to embrace the opportunities whilst continuing to deal with the challenges.
Okay, thank you, Greg. Thank you, Andrew, for your question. So we'll kind of finish off the kind of Brexit theme with Councillor Malcolm Spalding, who has a question about kind of trade deals with some of our Commonwealth partners. And perhaps, Greg, you could also mention something about the trade deal with China as well. Malcolm.
Thank you. And hello, Greg. Thank you for sparing this time for us, because we realise you're probably one of the busiest people in the country at the moment. My question is this, and it reflects things that other people have said to be positive about this whole process. Do you think that the Commonwealth and what is now called the Anglosphere, is that going to be an important sort of advantage for the UK in its trade in the future, with its worldwide trade?
The short answer to the Commonwealth, Malcolm, is yes. I mean, the Commonwealth is a huge Commonwealth-wide asset. I mean, it's not just a UK asset; it's all the countries in the Commonwealth. So we're in active, or have been in Canada. We've just rolled over that trade deal, signed a virtual signing ceremony by Boris Johnson and Justin Trudeau, 2 weeks ago now. Australia, New Zealand, live negotiations. India, I already mentioned, a good, strong possibility. Our trade relationship with India has actually improved a lot this year. You don't always have to have a formal free trade agreement to improve your terms of trade. So my ministerial colleague, Rano Jayawardena, leads on that and has done a great job with Minister Goyal, the Indian trade minister, in really improving that trade relationship and going a lot further on particular UK produce. We're trying to break open India, sorry, not break open, so we're trying to improve access, I should say, for UK professions. I think we heard from a chartered accountant earlier. We're trying to improve access for UK legal services, UK accountancy, UK financial services. I mean, this is like a massive part of the UK economy, services. And often discussion on trade gets quite bogged down in goods, particularly in agriculture. But for the UK, the big opportunities, we do have opportunities in agriculture as well, but the big opportunities will come in services. I think in terms of the Commonwealth, we've got CHOGM coming up in Kigali, in Rwanda, I'm not sure if a date has been set due to COVID. I think that's most likely to happen in the spring. Trade will be quite a big part of that. Trade will also be a big part of our G7 presidency coming up this year. So in answer, and we're also actually done trade agreements with, going around the world this year, we've done trade agreements with Kenya. We should be doing a trade agreement with Cameroon shortly. Ghana, we're still in a live negotiation with Ghana. So it's not just the, if you like, the old dominions, it's actually right the way across the Commonwealth that we're improving those trade relationships. And in terms of Michael's question about China, no, there is no trade agreement with China. We don't have plans for a free trade agreement with China. Of course, we do a huge amount of trade with China, not least in supplying PPE during the course of the pandemic. And our trade relationship with China will remain on a sort of a pragmatic footing, I would say, whilst recognizing that our relationship with China in other areas has been problematic, let's be frank, with things going on in Hong Kong, in Xinjiang and elsewhere. But we're not planning to do a trade agreement with China.
Okay, thank you, Greg. So most of the trade and goods that come from China arrive in the UK in a port. So Nicola, our executive manager, has got a question about what's currently going on in our ports.
It might be slightly outside your remit, Greg, but apparently there's a backlog of containers in some of the ports like Felixstowe due to stockpiling for Brexit plus COVID, PPE and Christmas. What's the government doing to help speed that up? Because I can imagine it will get worse if there's an issue come the 1st of January.
Yeah, thanks, Nicola. I'm not aware of there being a backlog of ports at the moment. You're right, it's not in my, it sounds like it might be in my ministerial brief of trade, but that's in the Department for Transport. I'm not aware of any such backlog or delays at our ports at the moment. we have made a lot of arrangements. So all of these arrangements the government is making just in case, particularly for after the 1st of January, the end of the transition period. So a lot of the arrangements we made in Kent for if there are delays at the border, a large part of which will be dependent on if there is not a further deal with the EU, particularly what response EU member states might take, particularly France. So there are a lot of preparations in place if there is congestion at the ports. Grant Shapps, the Transport Secretary, has visited, in fact, he was in Felixstowe, I think a couple of weeks ago. So he's visited most of the most significant ports to check readiness. But I'm not aware currently, but as I said, it's not within my ministerial portfolio directly ports. I'm not aware of any current congestion or backlog at ports.
So it's probably just scaremongering again. Okay.
Well, to be honest, I don't know. I haven't even seen that report, if it is a report. But I'm happy to try and find out.
Alan Rides has just put something in the comments about it. It's due to an imbalance of trade, not enough UK exports to China, and the containers are going back empty.
Well, that's, I mean, Alan is right. We don't sell enough to China, let's be quite frank. But I don't think that is a recent phenomenon, or even of something that's happened in the last few weeks. And that goes back some years. And by the way, the UK is not alone amongst Western countries in not selling enough to China. As it happens, during the pandemic, our trade balance has generally reversed. I mean, the UK has been running a bit of a trade surplus, and depending exactly how you measure trade surpluses and deficits in recent months, which has been contrary to the position for the last 10 years or so.
Okay. Thank you, Greg. So moving on to small business finance, sorry. We have Alistair Brown, the head of corporate banking for HSBC here. I think has got a question about small business finance.
Thanks, Michael. So Greg, I'm not sure if this is really in your remit or not, but I'm interested in your view from perhaps government. There's been, as you said, there's been a lot of support that's gone out to SMEs and companies. A lot of that's debt. And there are now a growing number of companies that are going to find it difficult to pay that back, and some even to pay the interest on it. I was wondering what conversations there are around replacing some of that debt with equity, or finding easier access to equity.
Well, thanks, Alistair. And that I'm afraid is completely outside of my remit. But look, first of all, I thank everything that HSBC and other banks have done. I think the banks have generally had a good crisis in terms of the assistance that has been provided both directly and indirectly. Now, I realize not every company would agree with that. Everybody will have their different experiences with different banks, but I think overall banks have done pretty well this year, UK banks in particular. One thing I could mention is we do want to get more export credit and export finance available to SMEs. It's been something we at the Department of International Trade have been working on with some success, but not as much success as we would like the last 4 years, in how do we get SMEs to access export finance? UK Export Finance, which is the world's best rated credit agency, export credit agency by sort of independent peers and everything. It's a fantastic place, UK Export Finance. Its portfolio traditionally is quite centered on large companies, defense, aerospace, geographically quite centered on, say, the Gulf. And we've been trying to get that portfolio more diversified, often working with banks like HSBC and others to design sort of different tools. You know, how do you scale up to SMEs? How do you, essentially, you've got to have a very different process between, you know, assessing a sort of an Airbus sale to Emirates Airlines to an SME which wants to sell, off the top of my head, luxury handbags to African countries. You know, there's kind of like, that's probably not the best example. Let's say luxury goods to Canada, let's say. You know, and you can't really use the same systems for both. So We're trying to find ways, how do you scale up and how do you make that more accessible to SMEs? Because some countries do. Australia's got a great story on how their export finance really permeates down to SMEs. And I think in the UK, we haven't yet cracked it, but we're working hard on it to get it more accessible, more known about. A lot of people don't know about UK export finance, UKEF. Be interesting if I did a poll now of everybody on this call who's heard of UKEF. My guess might be 50-50, something of that order. But you know, the UK has got one of the best export credit finance agencies available to both finance exports and importers potentially. And we can lend in, I think, around about 30 or 40 worldwide currencies, from the Australian dollar to the Zambian kwacha. We can cover you. But getting a way, making that easier for SMEs is work in progress. And we've done quite a lot of work with the banks on different tools and different ways of doing it. So I think that's definitely an area we can help. I think in terms of where we go forward on a lot of the support that's been given, I think that's really going to be a matter for Treasury rather than me. So I will probably pass on that one.
All right, thank you, Greg, and agree. We do a lot of work with UKEF, so great point. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
So, Greg, the kind of financial services is quite a big part of the UK economy and kind of banking. So what I understand is kind of evidence that the UK banks are closing bank accounts of EU residents because of passporting problems into the EU.
I haven't heard that, Michael. If anybody's got evidence of that, again, that's not in my portfolio. But I mean, my wife is an EU citizen, so you know, I've got quite a direct stake in that. And I think 17. Is it 11% for 17,000 or 17% and 11,000? I'd have to think about it. But more than 10% of my constituency are EU nationals. And I don't think that I've come across that. And I think people would have contacted their MP if that is the case. But look, if you've got anybody out there or anybody on this call, please contact me or Felicity Buchan, the MP of Kensington, as quickly as possible, and we will we will dive straight into that, because that is both a political issue and a constituency issue, which we certainly don't want to have happen. I mean, let me just reiterate, my wife isn't in the room at the moment, but EU nationals are incredibly welcome. I've lived part of my life in the EU personally, and I know how many EU nationals and what the incredible contribution that they make to our local and regional economy. We don't want to do anything to suggest that EU nationals are not welcome. So if there are examples of that, I will get onto it immediately with the banks concerned and or with the government as appropriate.
Okay, I'll email you some details of that one. So next, moving on to London, we'll probably Hammersmith Bridge shortly. We got John Cripps, President of the Chamber, with a question about hospitality.
Just checking you can hear me. You can hear me? Yep.
Yep. Very good.
Greg, firstly, thank you so much for taking the time to be part of us today. We're very grateful. So what, I suppose there's an element of predictability sort of about this question. What are your thoughts about the prospect of London going into Tier 3 and its effect, and also its effect on the hospitality sector?
Yeah, well, thanks, John. And I really feel for the hospitality sector. It's been well, an exceptionally difficult year. I don't think the government has had limited choice in this space, I would say. And of course, you can always critique individual government decisions, and you can critique the tiering system and who's in which tier and all this kind of stuff. I mean, we're trying to follow the evidence on this. There's a decision coming up next Wednesday on where the tiers will be going forward. I very much hope that London will not be put into Tier 3, but it will be evidence-led. You know, if the infection rate in London is high when the decision gets made, then it'll be led by the evidence rather than led by any other considerations. And that, I think, is the right thing to do overall. I know the hospitality has had a really, really, really tough year. Some pubs that are closed at the moment will not be reopening, and that's also the case for some restaurants. So I'm fully aware of the difficulties in the sector. I hear from people who run pubs, own pubs, visit pubs and restaurants quite often on this. So I can't really hold out any individual kind of olive branch to the sector, other than the fact we're also acutely aware of how important the Christmas and New Year period is to the hospitality sector. But we do have to get the balance right on these decisions, and we will be led by the evidence. I'm sorry, I can't be more helpful than that. But I'm very much hoping London isn't going to get put into tier 3.
Thank you.
So the hospitality sector have had a business rates exemption for the current year. The business rates demands are going to start dropping on people's mats in March next year, which is only kind of 3 months away. So I gather the government's got a review of kind of the business rates and what exemption is going to apply next year. Do you know when that we're likely to hear on that?
I'm afraid I don't, Michael. I can't add anything to what's already out there on that. I think it will be driven by the circumstances, how quickly the vaccine starts to take effect, how that changes the overall equation. You know, I think it's a kind of a moving feast, for want of a better term.
Okay. And do you think the development of the vaccines, that's the stuff for code, will have an effect on the UK trade?
Well, I think on various fronts, yes. If it means that our economy starts to recover its productivity and output from before last March, definitely. I mentioned earlier the UK trade surplus has been UK trade deficit has been changed into a small surplus. I don't really see that as cause for celebration because it means the economy has slowed. So I think the vaccine kicking and the impact it has on the wider economy, I think the impact it has on business travel, it's all very well doing, and it's quite convenient at times doing virtual meetings like this one. And in fact, those of us who very rarely did virtual meetings are now doing a lot of them, and that I think has added efficiency to the economy. But I do think that business travel is also essential in many sectors. So I think the ability of a vaccine to lead to the reopening of business travel, the improvement in the aviation sector, which has had one of the toughest years of everybody this past year, tourism, anybody dependent on visitors coming to the UK, of which almost certainly a large number of people on your call today will be. I think a vaccine offers a lot of hope for all of those sectors, and the trade sector. I mean, we've discovered that the UK has been a leader. In the UK, the Japan deal we did today was done entirely virtually. Nobody's ever done an entire trade agreement without actually seeing each other in person until Liz Truss went to Tokyo. There wasn't a single meeting in person to do that trade deal, the first of its kind. So, I mean, I think we, along with many others, have shown the ability to adapt in the environment. But I think a vaccine and some kind of return to normality, I think is really, really important for the economy and will boost trade.
Okay. So I know there's been kind of problems with Transport for London, and especially if there's reduced passenger numbers and its funding. And there's a 6-month, I think, funding agreement in place for it. Are there any plans to get up at the long-term for financial support for it?
Yeah, well, look, I mean, the government's already bailed out TfL twice. Important to recognise that TfL's financial problems did not start at the beginning of the pandemic. A lot of it date back to decisions. I am going to be political for once. Decisions taken by Mayor Sadiq Khan when he took over in 2016. His fares freeze, which by the way was a fares freeze really for tourists and one-time and small-time users of TfL services. Those who are traveling more frequently did not have a fares freeze, but that led to a revenue shortfall in TfL. I think the failure to grip Crossrail delivery, I think has also had consequences. The big shortfall in revenues caused by Crossrail not having been delivered on time. I mean, there's a number of things that predate the crisis. Obviously, the crisis has also had an impact on TfL, but we shouldn't pretend that this is a problem that was born on the 23rd of March. No, it's been going back for 4 years now. Of course, the government, it's vital for the whole economy that London's transport keeps moving. So that is a situation that the government will look at on an ongoing basis. But I think we want to see Sadiq Khan doing his bit to sort out TfL's finances. He could certainly bear down on a lot of the costs at TfL. I mean, your businesses might be amazed at some of the anything from like the travel perks through to pension rights enjoyed, and the number of senior people at TfL being paid more than £100,000 a year is huge. I mean, all of these different things, TfL has itself not really delivered in this space. So I think there's a lot going on there. We need to make sure that London can move around, particularly as we return to normality. The last thing we want is people returning to work in person, finding too few tube trains, too few buses to get onto to get into work. We don't want to have any additional hindrance to a return to normality in 2021.
Yeah. Thank you, Greg. So we've got one final question. We've got a few minutes to go from Chris Griffin, who I don't think is with us at the moment. His question was, is the government worried by the US system that has allowed Donald Trump to get to power and the possibility of a comeback? And what can the UK do about it? And what does the government see as the kind of most worrying aspects of change in dynamics in the UK for 2021?
Well, Michael, that is an amazing question. I could talk for some length on that, but I'm sort of seeing a little button in the corner saying recording. So I better be a little bit careful. I was born in the United States, but I'm a US citizen. And my parents are Brits, but more sort of by accident than anything. And I've lived in the US for most of the 1990s. So, and even worked in US politics. So I definitely have a view. But look, I think overall we need to see the US being a big, important player in the international system is in our national interest as well. I don't want to get drawn on the merits or otherwise of the current president or indeed the president-elect. But I think it's in the UK national interest, A, to have a very good, strong relationship with the United States, which we do. Secondly, that the US playing a big role multilaterally, internationally. We very much welcome President-elect Biden's commitment to rejoin the Paris Accord on climate change, for example. That is a really positive move. And seeing the US behaving more kind of multilaterally, I think is definitely in the UK national interest. Equally, some of the criticisms the US has made of different parts of the international system, some of those are not without foundation. The criticism of some of the trading practices of China, the criticism of how the World Trade Organization can work. We should not dismiss those critiques made by the Trump administration. But equally, I think a return to the multilateral system by the United States, and particularly the return to the Paris Accord, I think will be welcomed by most people in Kensington and Chelsea. So I'll give you a kind of a more balanced response. And we're looking forward to working closely. This is the government. We're looking forward to working very closely with the Biden administration. He is a natural friend of the UK. He's a transatlanticist and somebody that I think we can do business with.
Okay. So thank you, Greg. We're kind of conscious we're running out of time. I would just like to say thank you very much to the sponsors of the Chamber, especially the HSBC, BANAMS and BGM that have participated and asked questions today. So thank you very much for your help and support, and all the members of the Chamber. This year has been rather challenging, but I'm looking forward to next spring. I think there's going to be a massive upsurge in economic activity in March, April, May time. And I'm very much looking forward to things getting back to normal. We'll be back in 2021 with some online events in January, February, March about business recovery. And we're looking forward to doing online or real life networking again just as soon as we can. Greg, so thank you very, very much for your support and for participating today. It's been kind of great to hear your views, and look forward to see what happens on Sunday.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, everybody. Have a very good Christmas, and thank you. I mean that genuinely. The thanks for business and everything that you do. This country would not be where it is without the strength of its business sector. So thank you all very much indeed. Have a very good Christmas.
Thank you very much.
Goodbye.
Merry Christmas.
Bye. Okay, thank you.